Well, now that we just talked about Thomas and his qualities that we normally associate with him, I am going to urge you to try to forget all of that for at least the next 10 minutes or so. Try to forget everything that you thought you knew about Thomas and try to forget that we know him as a doubter. You maybe even think, because maybe we have been over time led to believe that he might be a little bit of an inferior disciple because of that. Forget that even you're pretty sure that Jesus rebukes him at the end of that passage for his lack of faith. And why? Because in each case, the opposite is true. First of all, Thomas is not anywhere in John's gospel described as a doubter. The Gospel of John is the only gospel where Thomas appears with his own lines and scene and characterization. He's referred to as the twin, a name that most of us maybe didn't know or have forgotten. When Jesus declared his intention to return to Judea, the other disciples tried to discourage him from coming because they knew that it would mean his death. It was Thomas who urged the others to follow Jesus so that they may die with him. Thomas is not so much a doubter as he is a realist. And a few days earlier, he had encountered reality like never before, as he saw his friend and Lord scourged, stabbed, bleeding, and nailed to a cross to die. Now when his friends tell him that they've seen the Lord, he reacts with a realistic skepticism, maybe kind of like a terminally ill patient might react if they had already accepted their fate and then received news of a miracle cure. Second, did you ever notice that what Thomas asked for was exactly what all of the other disciples had already gotten? When they saw Jesus that first time, they were able to do exactly what Thomas wanted to do. Put their fingers where the nails were, put their hands on Jesus' side. Would have any other disciple been less skeptical? Had they been the one not present when Jesus first appeared after his death? Perhaps some of the disciples had a sarcastic and kind of sense of humor and teased a lot, and maybe Thomas never knew when to believe them or not. Some of those things we maybe wouldn't have been written down. So maybe Thomas's worst issue is that he missed a meeting. What was he doing? Where was he? Why wasn't he there? He had chosen to grieve and process in solitude after the death of Jesus. The other 11 stayed together to grieve. He knew he was welcome to join them, but it was in his nature to seek quiet. Perhaps we have misunderstood the nature of faith altogether, assuming that the more faith we have, the fewer questions we'll ask. But the Bible offers a different picture, one in which faith and questioning are woven much closer than we might imagine. Faith, after all, isn't knowledge. It's being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Hebrews 11:1. Faith is a confidence in God's plan and provision for our future, as well as an expectation that God will fulfill everything he has promised. And third, Jesus' words at the end of this scene are not really about Thomas. After all, who are those who have believed and not seen? It starts with the members of the early Christian church, and it continues to include all of us. That's right. Jesus isn't so much rebuking Thomas as he is blessing us. Looked at this way, far from standing as the inferior doubter that Jesus rebuked, Thomas emerges as a model disciple in John's gospel. Or more accurately, he's a model of how one becomes a disciple, which is what all of us are called to be. Thomas looks at things realistically and counts the cost. Once he encountered Jesus, his faith is as realistic as his skepticism, as he doesn't merely believe, but makes the chief confession that Jesus is not only his Lord, but my God, which is the highest praise of Jesus made in the New Testament, and echoes the opening line of John's gospel. Little wonder that John followed this scene with his own two-sentence purpose statement. Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name. In other words, what happens to Thomas is exactly what John hopes happens to each of us when we read this story. So is it okay to ask God questions? Perhaps maybe the motive is an important part if we are questioning the authority of God. Perhaps not. But yes, God loves our questions. Asking questions before they become doubt, which shows lack of belief. Bring your questions to God in prayer and wait on the Lord. Wait reverently, expectantly, and faithfully, knowing and trusting that he is sovereign, faithful, and true. Amen.